Look, sometimes there is a fine line that you draw between criticism and to actually sabotage. And that is the story of Indian pharmacy today. Recently, the Congress party, who's the principal opposition party, actually released a video endorsing the BBC's unsubstantiated claims that India was flooding the African markets with substandard drugs. This was not an isolated incident, but a large part of the pattern where one particular party has consistently targeted India's pharmaceutical industry. This undermines the credibility of the Indian pharmacy abroad, and this video was another attempt to discredit India's pharma sector, which has been a global leader in supplying affordable, high-quality medicine to over 200 countries. For decades, the Congress has prioritized the interests of foreign multinational corporations over India's indigenous pharmaceutical industry, and we have evidence to actually prove this. From diluting patent laws to spreading vaccine hesitancy, their policies have significantly harmed the sector. Take the UPA rule, for instance. Between 2004 and 2014, the Congress actually tilted the market in favor of Western pharmaceutical giants like Pfizer and GSK, which means that the Indian companies were sidelined. These Indian companies had the potential to revolutionize global healthcare. However, changes are in place. Over the last few years, India has undergone a remarkable transformation. It has cemented its position as the pharmacy of the world. There are many initiatives which has actually helped in India achieving that position, mainly the production-linked incentive, the PLI scheme, Vaccine Maitri, and the Genome India project. India has actually achieved self-reliance and established itself as a leader in global healthcare innovation. During the UPA era, Congress policies actually somewhat favored the multinational corporations over domestic manufacturers. The government's vaccine procurement policies were designed to benefit global pharma giants like GSK and Sanofi, sidelining cost-effective Indian alternatives. The Competition Commission of India actually looked into this, and they found that the Congress had manipulated the tendering processes to benefit these corporations, which means that the Indian firms were actually completely blocked and it was receiving an unfair treatment. You look at the Pfizer's Visakhapatnam plant, for instance, which was flagged by the US's FDA for severe violations of manufacturing practices, yet the previous government took no action against the company. This starkly contrasted with their treatment of the Indian pharma firms, which faced stricter scrutiny and regulatory hurdles. More recently, during the COVID-19 pandemic, a few particular parties actively worked to undermine India's indigenous vaccine efforts. Covaxin, developed by biotech, was subjected to relentless skepticism despite passing rigorous safety tests. Some leaders not only questioned its efficacy but also fueled vaccine hesitancy by politicizing the issue at a time when India was facing a global pandemic. At the same time, they aggressively pushed for expensive foreign alternatives like Pfizer and Moderna, even though these vaccines came with strict liability waivers that would have forced the Indian government to bear all the risks of side effects. Akhilesh Yadav, the former Chief Minister of Uttar Pradesh and the leader of the Samajwadi Party, who is also an ally of the Congress Party, went so far to call Covaxin a BJP vaccine, discouraging people from taking it. They played directly into the hands of the foreign pharma companies that sought to dominate the Indian vaccine market. Ironically, the same set of leaders who criticized India's vaccine distribution efforts also lambasted the government for providing free vaccines to poorer nations under the Vaccine Maitri initiative because they thought that India deserved to have all those vaccines. These two hypocrisies do not balance each other out, and this actually came out after a point where patterns were beginning to emerge. What is India's resurgence story as a pharma powerhouse? We've gone from import dependency to global leadership. Look at the last few years. What essentially the government of India has done is successfully reduced its dependency on foreign pharma companies. The PLI scheme actually incentivized domestic production of high-value drugs, particularly those that are used to treat cancer, rare diseases, and viral infections. India has also begun manufacturing critical medicine devices such as CT scanners, MRI machines, dialysis units, further reducing the reliance on these foreign imports. Despite all the opposition, the Vaccine Maitri program actually proved to be a major success for India, with India actually supplying vaccines to more than 75 countries during the COVID-19 pandemic. This included nations like Bangladesh, Myanmar, Nepal, which received millions of doses, and even UN peacekeepers benefited from India's contributions. India's ability to provide life-saving vaccines at affordable prices solidified its reputation as a global responsible leader and a healthcare provider, countering some of the false narratives which were actually being built against India when it was under pressure. Look at the medical tourism and how it boomed in the last few years. India's rising stature in the global healthcare is also evident in this regard. There is a 33% increase in medical tourism in 2023, which actually surpassed the pre-pandemic levels. The sector will continue to rise despite all the challenges, and policies such as having e-visas for 167 countries have actually made India a preferred destination for affordable and high-quality medical treatment. Let me tell you about something very exciting: the Genome India project and why India's biotech future is very bright. Launched in 2020 with a budget of 238 crores, the Genome India project actually aims to map 10,000 Indian genomes. This initiative will revolutionize personalized medicine by allowing doctors to tailor treatments based on genetic information, which will ultimately, if you think about it, lead to breakthroughs in disease prediction and drug development. This project actually aligns with India's larger goal of becoming a bioeconomy leader, with the sector growing from $10 billion in 2014 to $130 billion in 2024. And this is projected to reach $300 billion by 2030. There seems to be a global pressure against Indian pharma because it is doing so well. Let me explain this using a few examples, right? The World Health Organization recently blamed an Indian manufacturer for child deaths in Gambia without actually providing solid scientific backing. However, both the Indian and the Gambian investigations debunked these claims, and it revealed that there was no conclusive evidence linking Indian drugs to the tragedy, which means that this incident was a part of a broader campaign to tarnish India's reputation as a global pharma leader and clear the way for Western companies to regain dominance. International media outlets have not been very kind either. If you look at the BBC, it has played a key role in pushing an anti-India narrative, especially in pharmaceuticals. Why? Because it selectively highlights minor compliance issues while it actually ignores India's massive contributions to global healthcare. This is consistent with BB's history of biased reporting, whether it's with the coverage of Gujarat riots to its misleading narratives on Kashmir and Balakot. Recently, it was actually revealed that the BBC has received funding from USAID, which actually raises concerns that it attacks the Indian pharma industry because of a particular premeditated effort to weaken India's economy, and it's not just journalism as they claim it to be. What do we learn from all of this? That being an opposition is important, but do not harm India's interests. Do not work against India's pharmaceutical industries. Do not favor foreign interests over domestic growth. From manipulating procurement policies to spreading vaccine hesitancies, what some parties have actually done is they've actively sabotaged India's self-reliance in healthcare. Despite these efforts, India has emerged as a global pharmaceutical powerhouse under the current leadership. It has driven innovation, it has driven affordability, and it is becoming a global leader in healthcare security. With a projected market value of $130 billion by 2030, India's pharma industry is poised for even greater success. The era of Western pharma dominance in India is over, and some of the parties which have vested interests towards Western pharma firms, their interference has actually failed. India's pharma sector should thrive, will thrive, and will continue to see success despite all the opposition.